Today, we're going to have Juanita Brown, our program director, introduce our speaker. Juanita.
There you go. We got some fun stuff coming, huh, guys? But right now, I had a chance to chat with him. I think you're really going to enjoy Doug Bell. He's a retired manager of Clark County Finance Department. So for 25 years, he was the guy managing to figure out which projects that Henderson was going to get involved in, this being one of them. He was responsible for the county's economic development efforts. You'll learn that Apex Industrial Park is in North Las Vegas, and it began with a bang, literally. You may not know that Pepcon Chemical Plant explosion happened on May 4th of 1988 and caused major collateral damage for 10 miles around Gibson Road and East Lake Mead. What a mess. This presentation will review the resulting federal legislation and how Clark County, the private sector, and the city of North Las Vegas moved forward with infrastructure improvements that set the stage for economic diversification, and that's a very important key. Now, because he's got a lot to talk to us about, please hold your questions till the end. You will have time for questions and answers, and please silence your cell phones. And please welcome Doug Bell.
As I said, Apex Industrial Park, it began with a bang. Oh, I couldn't help but think how appropriate it was to have that whole emergency thing occur before this presentation. Okay, like a minister, you like to tell people what you're going to tell them about. You're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what they heard, kind of reinforce it. Anyway, the key points of this talk are that infrastructure is critical to economic development, that government policy and private sector investment decisions really matter, that disasters create opportunities for change and future growth, and this is also very important, public-private partnerships is how things really happen. And for me, the other point is, and I'm sure you found it true in your lives, we all build on the work of others who precede us. Okay. Just so you know where we're at, what we're talking about the Apex Industrial Park. Now, this bottom part here is still in the Las Vegas Valley. Then you have a ridge line right here, and the Apex Industrial area most of it is on the other side of the next valley. As you go on I-15 going up towards Utah, it's on the left. And this road right here is 93, which you'd take to go up to Alamo and Caliente and Pioche. And right over here is the Apex landfill. So here is the Las Vegas Valley, and Henderson is down in this area right here. This is a picture of a master plan for the Apex. Let me hold on to this. It's too hard. I want to move around. This is the Apex Industrial Master Plan. The white areas show road areas, and throughout Apex are utility corridors. And again, this shows some examples of utility corridors, which we will talk about more shortly. Okay, a little bit of information about me. I worked in South Carolina from 1975 to 1978, and during that time I was involved with the Community Development Block Grant Program and a major revitalization program in the Central Business District of Greenville, South Carolina. As part of that initiative, we helped to develop a $5.5 million urban development action grant to build it was a joint public-private venture to build a Hyatt hotel and convention lobby area. And I also personally prepared a Economic Development Administration grant to build a parking garage next to that hotel. As a result of these federal grants experiences, I was recruited to come to Las Vegas in 1978 to serve as the Clark County Federal Grants Coordinator, where my immediate duty was to administer a $13 million EDA Local Public Works grant that had been previously received by the county. In addition, I was also involved in applying for various federal, state, and foundation grants. Many of you may remember from my past presentation on the Wetlands Park about the Max C. Fleischman Foundation and how that helped start the Wetlands Park. When Clark County became eligible to receive Community Development Block Grant funds from HUD in 1982, I then served as the lead manager for the major urban county federal grant program until I retired in 2008. During my 30 years with Clark County, my office brought in over $300 million in federal, state, and private foundation funds, which were used to complete an assortment of capital facilities throughout both the urban and rural portions of Clark County. I also led the county's economic development efforts and worked closely with the Nevada Development Authority in recruiting new businesses to Southern Nevada. Okay, that's the lead-in. What I really want to talk about is the importance of infrastructure. As many of you remember, just recently that bridge was hit by that cargo thing and it knocked out the bridge, which is creating certainly a lot of problems for the Boston area and the port of Baltimore. But what do we mean by infrastructure? That's a term that people throw around, and I kind of want to put it in perspective. Infrastructure is, to me, a host of physical capital improvements that support our everyday lives. A general listing could include roads, railroads, tunnels, bridges, storm sewers, the electrical power grid, sewer and water systems, pumping stations, the utilities of water, power, gas, and telephone, and the invisible systems of microwave, radio, satellite, internet, etc. These elements create the skeleton which supports our modern life. And when one element is missing, we quickly find that we are more than inconvenience, and that our economic system has to find a workaround while this necessary repairs are underway. The building of housing units, schools, libraries, airports, retail establishments, commercial and industrial plants do not exist in a vacuum, but are part of a much larger community mosaic supported by the spider web of infrastructure that undergirds and sustains our daily life. So this is pretty important stuff. It's not an exaggeration to say that infrastructure is critical to fostering economic development. Pipelines and roads that do not reach vacant parcels of land mean that such property must lay in abeyance until this necessary infrastructure is first provided. The timing and financing of infrastructure investments is likewise critical, as public and private investments can make the difference whether a community grows or remains stagnant. As such, public policy decisions can set the stage for the future growth of a community, and the vision of our leaders can determine whether a marshaling of resources will occur to bring about the change and resulting economic growth. All this is important. So let's talk about Nevada. We are here today because of Hoover Dam. This was probably, after the development of the railroad, is probably the single most important infrastructure improvement that was done to support the rest of it that came after. With the completion of the dam in 1935, Las Vegas, a railroad town located between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City, was now posed for greater things, which at that time were basically focusing on gambling and the railroad. And here's a little story I think is kind of funny. During the dedication ceremony for the new Boulder Dam, when asked why it was not called Hoover Dam, President Roosevelt quipped that President Hoover was not worth a damn. When the Republicans regained control of the Congress in 1947, the name was reverted from Boulder Dam back to Hoover Dam, its original planning name. Okay, so Hoover Dam was critical, the railroad was critical. With the turmoil in the beginning of the World War II, the federal government elected to develop a munitions plant along the rail line that had been used to bring supplies to the Hoover Dam site. With ready electrical power and water from Hoover Dam, this plant, known as Basic Magnesium Industries, or BMI, was constructed along Water Street and Lake Mead in the older areas of Henderson. This defense plant was the main impetus for the beginning of the city of Henderson. So if you want to know why Henderson is here, it's because of the Basic Magnesium Incorporated plant. This defense plant was the main impetus for the beginning of the city of Henderson. A California architect named Paul Revere Williams developed 1,000 units of housing called Basic Town Site. These are the older houses in Henderson, as well as 509 units Victory Village apartments, as well as 324 units which were racially segregated apartments for black people as Carver Park, all of which was designed to house the workers of this new munitions plant. Basic Magnesium processed magnesium ore mined in Gabbs, Nevada in Nye County, which was then shipped by rail to the plant, where an electrolytic process removed magnesium from the ore, and the final miracle metal was then used in aircraft parts and casings for munitions. The plant operated from 1942 to 1944 and produced 1/4 of the nation's magnesium at the time. So this was really, really important. Okay. If you can make that one just a little larger. With the completion of the war, the federal government declared this plant surplus, and the Nevada legislature made it possible for the Colorado River Commission to purchase this site and to convert this abandoned plant into industrial parks. Efforts were underway which ultimately led to the incorporation of the city of Henderson in 1953. Now there's some real interesting things about this chart. This area right here is a county island surrounded by the city of Henderson. The area, let me see if I can get that line. You see this right here? That is US 95. And we all travel on that as we go out to Boulder City and Arizona, et cetera. This area right here was also part of the county island. Before this road was built, all of this was the county island, surrounded by the city of Henderson. It should be noted that this heavy industrial area was not annexed into the boundaries of this new city. So it was a county island of unincorporated land, but instead remained a part of unincorporated Clark County. This county island was slowly surrounded by the growing urban areas of the city of Las Vegas. This portion of unincorporated county continued to attract other businesses, many of which were in the petrochemical industries. Unfortunately, this area was also subject to industrial pollution as the settling ponds frequently leaked into the groundwater, creating the need for environmental remediation of this site before other uses could be explored. One could argue that it was essentially a Superfund site. You think about that in terms of other places, but that was here in Henderson. And this was really the collateral consequence of the war, where defense contractors put production and victory first over the implementation of the necessary stuff. Now, this picture, if you look at the brown area, that is part of the Basic Magnesium Incorporated plant. We all who've come from back east may remember old abandoned steel mills. Well, this was essentially our abandoned steel mill. And again, you can see how big this plant was with these other buildings kind of in front of it. Now, to address this, the city of Henderson started encouraging the building of what I call concrete tilt-up warehouses in the front along East Lake Mead, basically so you wouldn't see all this lovely stuff. And as part of this, there was also the shopping center that was developed, the Target Shopper Center that you see on East Lake Mead and Water Street. So again, a lot of this older area is hidden. But if you go on East Gateway Bridge, which goes up and over because you had the rail line that served this whole area, this shows some of the petrochemical facilities that are in the unincorporated areas of the county. Now, the city of Henderson did not annex this area because who wants to own a Superfund site? And again, you can see the rail line that was used to help build and service the Basic Magnesium Incorporated area and the various tanker trucks. Okay, so now we're going to get to more current history. When I came here in Clark County, I told you I administered various grants, wrote various grant applications. And one of the grants that I wrote was a $1.5 million grant application to the Economic Development Administration for the installation of a water line beginning at Stephanie and Russell, proceeding southward to the intersection of Stephanie, as well as a new road entitled America Pacific, which was constructed between Stephanie and Gibson. This water line and road project was instrumental in opening and beginning the development of a 550-acre area known as the Gibson Business Park. With the development of this water line, there's the American Pacific Way. We saw the development of Ocean Spray bottling plant. And I always thought this was hysterical. I mean, absolutely hysterical that they build a bottling plant in a desert community of Henderson. And I asked people, why are you building this plant here? And when they told me the answer, I thought, boy, that is so cool. The reason is you had all these trucks bringing stuff in from LA, coming to Las Vegas, because we were consuming all kinds of goods and services to handle our growth. But we didn't have anything to ship back. So the trucks were going back empty. So with the bottling plant, they were able to get really good prices to do their bottling. They take the water and use condensed syrup and make into apple juice and whatever else. And then they'd ship it back to LA and other points from this bottling plant. Okay, another thing that was built in this county, the Gibson Business Park area, was the Department of Motor Vehicles place, which you all, I'm sure, have visited here to get your registration and other stuff. Another building that was built was the Kid Marshmallow Plant. And as you can imagine, they made marshmallows. And unfortunately, this plant was constructed in close proximity to the Pepcon plant, which we're going to talk a lot about. And when this plant blew up, goodbye marshmallow plant. Today, the Gibson Business Park has become the site of many tilt-up concrete manufacturing and service businesses, as well as some apartment complexes adjacent to the Gibson Business Park. We've also seen the development of the Valley Auto Mall built next to the US 95 Expressway. Okay, with the development of that highway improvement, the county unincorporated land was then split into two, with the land to the west of the expressway, i.e. the Gibson Business Park, subsequently incorporated into the city of Henderson. The land to the east of that US 95 around the BMI plant was left under county's control for future environmental cleanup. Currently, this remediation is being done by the Nevada Environmental Response Trust, which began its work in February 2011 and continues today. Okay, but before I get to that, I just want to mention, I hope you all are familiar when I use the term concrete tilt-up warehouse. This is really important that you get this. Throughout the Las Vegas Valley, you see a lot of these concrete tilt-up warehouses, which what they do is they build a concrete slab first, then they put plastic down, and then they build the walls on top of that concrete slab, and then they tilt them up. Four sides are tilted up, and they connect the walls with roof trusses. So essentially, it's a big box with the base and the walls made out of concrete, with then roof trusses on top, and then you'd have your air conditioning units and all that on top. So throughout Las Vegas Valley, you see a ton of that. And so it's really important to understand that concept. Anyway, let's talk about Pepcon. And as I said, it was a lead-in from that thing we had earlier. This occurred May 4th, 1988. And for those of us who lived in Las Vegas at the time, we won't forget this. This plant blew up, and one of the ironies is it started by a fire, and then it blew up. And we had somebody with a camera recorder recording this. Now, that was kind of cool because we were able to take that camera recorder video and put it in a presentation to Congress when we were asking for the land to develop Apex. And so every time the congressman or senator started falling asleep, on the video we'd have it the plant blow up again. I'm serious about that. Okay, so this was really a massive explosion. But this chart is especially interesting. You see the triangle, the line going down the hypotenuse, that was Boulder Highway. There was no US 95 at that time. So you see all the vacant land. And Henderson, I'm going to speak as somebody who was a county employee, always thought of itself as different from the rest of the valley. Because for so many years, it was. It was like 15 miles from Henderson to get to the main part of the Las Vegas Valley. So there was always this attitude in Henderson, we're different. And they were until the Las Vegas Valley reached them, which has happened. And of course, you see there's no US 95. It had not been built when this Pepcon plant blew up. But that shows the immediate point of explosion. And this shows some of the pictures of what happened when that plant blew up. As I said, Kid Marshmallow next to it was a burnt s'more. Okay, this talks about what happened. They were doing some repair works, and what the main fuel for this explosion was ammonia perchlorate. Now, to understand that, let me give you an example. Remember the Challenger, when that blew up? That was essentially ammonia perchlorate blowing up. That was in space where Pepcon was on the ground. It was two large explosions equivalent to 200 tons and 500 tons of TNT. Over 70 million in property damage, up to broken windows 30 miles away. This gas line was ruptured, and we had massive fire. The Pepcon plant was destroyed, and as well as large quantities of AP. And this had a significant impact on our defense program because we use ammonia perchlorate in our rockets. Now, one of the good parts, there is good parts even in disasters, and this is for me. Because my wife, honey, raise your hand, stand up or raise your hand behind you there. She was working in California with Raytheon on the missile program, and she lost her job because there was no ammonia perchlorate for a while because of this explosion. There were only two plants that produced ammonia perchlorate. One was McGee, and the other was Pepcon, and Pepcon was obviously destroyed. So there wasn't a lot of ammonia perchlorate to be around to be building missiles. So my wife, she wasn't my wife then, she got a job in Las Vegas in Clark County, and I met her there, and a couple of years later we got married. So there was something good that came out of it, and I always like to tell her that our relationship began with a bang. Okay, so I'm quickly going through this stuff because there's a lot of stuff to cover. Okay, so what happened? Here we have this massive explosion. The community is reeling from this explosion. You know, we've had several events that in my time with Las Vegas, I've lived in Las Vegas since 1978, so I've been here for 46 years. And clearly I remember the MGM fire, which many of you may remember or read about or heard about. Obviously Pepcon was another. We had the other fires that occurred in the valley. We've had shootings in the valley. I mean, but Pepcon was one of those moments that if you were here, you remembered. So what happened? Well, as part of this effort, there was a blue ribbon panel done to discuss where do we go from here? And Governor Richard Bryan, he had a blue ribbon panel, and they decided what we needed to do was build a remote industrial park out of the Las Vegas Valley so that we would not have an explosion like this again, causing the kind of damage that had. And this explosion only killed 2 people, which was truly amazing. Only 2 people died. But there was a lot of physical damage. Now, had we had a lot of residential housing next to Pepcon when it went off, it would have been really bad news, because this was a major explosion. So they came up with the idea of doing a remote industrial park area, and a law was submitted to Congress, which was passed. I told you about the video that helped bang and keep people's attention. And as part of that law, there was some key points to the legislation. First of all, there was legislation that enabled Clark County, that is the government that you're all under, to have a 10-year period from the date of the legislation, which was July 1989, for 10 years to be able to purchase up to 21,000 acres at the Apex Industrial Park. So this is a lot of land. Secondly, the law said that there would be 3,700 acres of Apex land would be sold to the county, and the county then would sell it to McGee so they could do ammonia blending and storage up at Apex. So if it blew up again, it wouldn't be in the urban valley. The third part of the legislation was also important, was that the federal government would reserve the utility right-of-way corridors within Apex, and that's caused problems, and we'll talk about that too. But here's the real rub. That after Clark County would purchase the BLM land at its then appraised value, and we would then make the necessary improvements to develop the industrial park, sell the land to others, we would then have to pay to the federal government 50% of our profits. 50%. Okay, that's important to remember. Okay, so what were the consequences of these provisions? First of all, it made Clark County develop the potential master developer of the Apex site with 10 years to buy the land. 2, it set in motion the first land sale between BLM and the county and Kerr-McGee for their blending and storage, and that was with Kerr-McGee. Thirdly, it created the ongoing problem of utility access, which right now is causing problems to developers who want to build out there. And Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has introduced legislation to try and speed up that process, because anytime you work with BLM, it's a career. And the last point is what I call the poison pill. And this is the part that really irked me. As it essentially made BLM and the federal government a silent partner in the proposed development of Apex Industrial Park. Under the legislation, Clark County would get the privilege of buying the federal land at its fair market value with no discount, and then it would need to share the profits at a 50% rate with the federal government after deducting related infrastructure development investments, et cetera. Okay, this is important. This last provision meant that Clark County would have to take all the risk, and then if the county was actually successful in developing this remote industrial park after spending millions, that it would have to share its profits with the federal government, which only had to sell off its land at its then appraisal value. Frankly, this provision was a real disincentive to Clark County moving forward to promptly develop this remote industrial area, as it is certainly not typical in a normal development process for a land seller to also receive a share of the profits without first contributing cash towards the project. In development jargon, such investments are often called having, quote, skin in the game. In other words, you've got something that you put into it besides that you sold the land. Thus, it is very unusual for the federal government to impose itself in such a manner, but this was a key requirement of the legislation. Now, regarding the Silver State, now Republic Services project, it should be noted that the Environmental Protection Agency in the late 1980s had passed new requirements for the operation of landfills to protect against long-term seepage into the groundwater, in that these regulations would have required significant modifications to the existing landfill serving the Las Vegas Valley. A decision was reached to encase that landfill rather than compete at those required improvements, and instead develop an entirely new landfill at the Apex Industrial Park. This is where your garbage goes, guys, the new Apex Industrial Landfill. For those traveling up north, up Interstate 15, one can see this new landfill located in the mountainous area to the east. In that this is Las Vegas' primary landfill, this land and subsequent development was of extreme importance to the community. The Apex landfill is 1,900 acres and is one of the largest landfills in the country, having a size of 1,400 football fields, and is expected to handle this community's waste at present rates for 250 years. So we got plenty of garbage space, folks. And of course, we're doing really well with all our recycling efforts, which again make the waste stream going out to Apex less. Because if we didn't do all that, you know, it would fill up quicker, but it's still got plenty of capacity. Okay, the first two land sales that were done, one was to Kerr-McGee, and the other one was for the land for the Apex Industrial Park. After that occurred in the early 1990s, not much was occurring at Apex. Things began to change, however, when Las Vegas City Councilman and real estate developer Mr. Al Levy approached the county commission to see if the county would be willing to negotiate with an exclusive private entity to replace Clark County as the master developer of Apex. This private entity was composed of the leading lights of Las Vegas, such as Las Vegas Paving, Southern Nevada Paving, other prominent citizens, who would then be responsible for shepherding the development of the Apex Industrial Park. Now, here's the key thing. Before the county could actually proceed in negotiating and following up with Mr. Levy's proposal, we had to first determine if such a transfer in function would be acceptable under the federal enabling legislation. And secondly, whether the 50% profit requirement going to the federal government would still be enforced with a new private entity. I mean, those are real important points, rather than Clark County now serving as the master developer at Apex. Fortunately, when this issue was posed to the BLM Solicitor General, the response received was that a private entity could develop Apex and know the 50% payment of profit would no longer be required. This was really important. With this critical ruling, the county could then engage and enter into negotiations to transfer its responsibility over Apex to this new entity entitled Apex Industrial Park. Okay, that's the history. That's getting us to where we are. As a county staff member then responsible for industrial economic development, I was personally involved and served as the county's lead representative in negotiating a master development agreement, first with Mr. Al Levy, and then following his death with Mr. David Carver, and for the master development agreement, and it was entitled the Apex Heavy Industrial Use Real Estate Transfer Agreement. Upon its approval by the Clark County Board of Commissioners in August 1997, I then worked closely with Mr. Carver of Apex Industrial Park and BLM in coordinating the final land sales at Apex between all the parties and Clark County, which was completed. Now, this is the real interesting thing. Just 2 weeks before the end of the county's 10-year real estate option with BLM. 2 weeks. Now, sometimes you have to goose the federal government. And so I wrote a letter to the head of BLM locally as we started approaching this deadline, because this was the drop deadline. If it wasn't done by this, it wasn't happening. And I wrote him a letter. I said, you know, we got to make this happen. Because if we don't, and there's another Pepcon blast, I said, I can promise you that both you and I are going to be appearing before a congressional hearing in Las Vegas explaining why we couldn't get this deal done. So I guess that letter kind of lit a fire under him, and we were able to get it done 2 weeks before. But even so, after the final land sale was completed, it still took another year to complete the surveying of the property to develop what you call meets and bounds. That's all the legal jargon for the actual boundary of the property, so that individual property deeds could be developed from the land patent. It should be noted that the final land sales also included several other entities who were already located out at Apex, existing on BLM mining claims. These two entities were Georgia Pacific Wallboard Plant and Chemical Lime Company, and I'll show you pictures of that. As part of this final land sales agreement, they were now able to convert those properties from mining claims to now fee simple land ownership. I also coordinated another land sale option with Ulysses Corporation and final land sale with that firm for a proposed truck stop to be located at the southern end of the Apex Park, adjacent to the old highway and the ramp exit for Interstate 15. In negotiating the master development agreement, my goal was to recover the $1 million that the county had previously invested in developing the master plan for this industrial area, as well as any other county-related expenses. Rather than applying a real estate commission for processing this land sale, I included in this agreement an administrative fee per acre. To avoid a repetition of the Pepcon blasts affecting nearby residential structures, I included language that the master developer would agree to accept a deed restriction on this BLM land, prohibiting the development of any population-dense use such as residential housing, motel, hotel, casino, prison, stadiums, and sporting complex within Apex. The master developer also agreed to prohibit future residential uses. The master developer was also to employ water conservation efforts, including desert landscaping, drought-tolerant plantings, and no grass surfaces unless such grass would be irrigated from sewage effluent gray water. The master developer was also to develop a capital facilities infrastructure plan and a marketing plan delineating how the developer intended to facilitate the relocation of hazardous facilities from the Las Vegas Valley to Apex and attract national and foreign firms to Apex. Now, here's the key thing about economic development. After you spend millions of dollars building a plant, about the only way you're going to shut down that plant is if you have like a Pepcon plant blow it up, or it becomes so technically obsolescent that there was no point in putting any more money into it. So the reality is all that petrochemical stuff that we saw in Henderson that's still in the unincorporated area surrounded by the city of Henderson, that stuff's not likely to move unless there's another Pepcon blast in that area. So the idea of really moving current hazardous stuff up there is not likely to happen unless you have either planned obsolescence or fires, explosions, and all that good stuff. Okay. It should be noted that the developers, who were the master developers, they did try to make a run to build housing at Apex. And they went back to the board and they tried to build housing on this the southern tip of the Apex industrial area, which is still in the Las Vegas Valley. And that was a good idea. I wasn't really opposed to it because there were still topographic mountains that would block any other explosions that were occurring on the other side of the ridge. But here's where the Air Force stepped in and they said, no way, because they didn't want any residential housing encroaching on their pathways to Nellis Air Force Base, because that's a big issue for Air Force bases. They always have problems with the neighbors complaining about noise and being concerned about having bombs drop in their heads. And in fact, out at Apex, before the land was sold, there was a fighter plane or a bomber, I don't know which one it was, but they were forced to drop fuel before they landed at Nellis. And this had to be remediated before we could complete the land sale. So, you know, issues of planes flying overhead is pretty important. Okay, let's move along here. Okay, so let's look at Apex. This is the chemical lime facility where they've been mining a mountain to develop gypsum. And you see that mountain being mined, and then they load it up in these train cars to haul to wherever. This is the cogeneration plant that's tied to the Georgia Pacific a wallboard plant. And what's cool about this is it's generating electricity, but the excess steam is then used at Georgia Pacific to help in their process of doing wallboard. And of course, they benefit by having a railroad line right there too, to put their wallboard on and ship it to wherever, you know, for their sale of their product. Again, Georgia Pacific, and again, we have their wallboard plant there. So it's a big facility. You see it as you drive on I-15, but that's the Georgia Pacific plant with a cogeneration facility right next to it. Okay, remember the first piece of land that was sold was the Kerr-McGee property. And this was going to be a blending and storage operation, but eventually Kerr-McGee decided that really wasn't what they really wanted to do. So you see the smokestacks behind it, and that became the Charles Kenzie electrical power generation plant. Out at Apex, there are actually 3 electrical power generating plants out there. So, you know, those things aren't really pretty to see, but they're really important as part of infrastructure for supporting our valley, especially when it gets hot as hell in the summertime, and we need that electricity to pump our air conditioning. Okay, this little bulb, you see it on Sunrise Mountain in the valley. This is the old landfill that was built on Valley View in Las Vegas Valley. It was determined it was cheaper to relocate the landfill than to do all the necessary remodeling that would have required. This is the Apex Industrial Park, Apex landfill today. And it's a big, big area. Okay, this chart, I apologize that it's not as good as it should be, but this shows the land sales that occurred at Apex. The first sale, as I said, was the Kerr-McGee site for 3,351 acres. Then we see the second site, which was Silver State, and that was the landfill site. And it's called Silver State, but it was eventually purchased by Republic Services. So that's where the landfill is. And then the third sale was the sale that I coordinated. The first 2 were done by Bob King and my staff, and I did the third sale, which was the 10,000 acres to the Apex Industrial Park, Inc. We sold the land to Chemical Lime, where their plant was located. Georgia Pacific, we sold their land, sold them the land so they could get from mining claim to a fee claim, fee simple. Ulysses Corporation had 16 acres, and then there's a little bit more land to Republic Services. So overall, you're looking at approximately 17,000 acres that was sold, that was transferred from BLM to the county, from the county then to the private sectors in a simultaneously escrow. So, you know, the money, the checks move around the table, the simultaneous escrow. And so the land cost was actually, for all that, was $12,204,000. Then we had various engineering costs, and we had escrow title insurance costs, and then we had the administrative fee that I was charging the entities so that we could recover the $1 million that the county had previously spent on its master development plan. Okay, things are moving along. So we get to the point of the land sale had occurred, but still a lot wasn't happening. And the reason for that was water. Water is a necessary element for life as well as economic development. So, what made the difference? Fundamentally, there was a chicken and egg problem. The chicken and egg problem was, how do you bring water line to an area when you don't have the demand for it? And until you get the water line there, you won't be able to get the demand for it. So it's a chicken and egg. You know, you want the industrial development to occur, but somebody has to front the cost of bringing the pipeline there. So the question is, why did the county not serve as the master development? And my answer is, while conceivably the county commission could have taken the lead in purchasing the land from the federal government and developing the Apex Industrial Park without going to a private entity, I believe that the timing was not right. Water has always been a major obstacle in the development of the Apex Industrial Park. I believe that it would have been premature for the county to orchestrate the installation of a water line in the 1990s. Similar to, as in the Alaska case, of a bridge to nowhere, many would have thought this Apex water line was a pipeline to nowhere, as this would have been a highly speculative and expensive venture, and many would have questioned the expense of a pipeline designed to serve what was then an essentially empty area. So it was a chicken and egg problem. And I also kind of hoped that the Water District was talking about mining water in Lincoln and White Pine counties and bringing that water by pipeline back to Las Vegas. This was their water importations scheme, similar to what happened in California when they took water from the Mono Lake area to bring water to LA. We were going to do the same type of thing. Unfortunately, it all got caught up in legal litigation on water rights, and it was dropped. So, because had it occurred, water problems would have been solved. That pipeline would have come right down 93, made a right turn on I-15, and it would have brought water right to the Apex Industrial Park. But it didn't happen. So we're back to the problem of, we got this land, and there's very limited groundwater there that you could mine to serve the facilities there. So until some entity brings water there, it's just a lot of empty land. So people could buy the land, but they really couldn't develop it without the water. So how did this dilemma get resolved? Okay, this ties into recent Nevada history. North Las Vegas was the ground zero place for foreclosures in 2008 recession. I mean, they were in a world of hurt. So many of the new neighborhoods had been built went into foreclosure. I mean, we're talking major foreclosures. North Las Vegas's tax situation was desperate. They weren't getting the revenues because people were moving out, and the property values were going down because of people moving out from all the foreclosures. And literally, the city of North Las Vegas was very subject to going into bankruptcy. That doesn't happen very often in government, but they were really, really close. Okay, so what happened? The mayor of North Las Vegas and the city management decided to grow their way out of their crisis, because they were severely in a crisis. And their mayorally instigated an emergency plan called Growth Economics, whereby the city of North Las Vegas would grow its way out of the crisis. As part and parcel of this effort, the city of North Las Vegas began annexing the land along the Interstate 15, heading up to and including the Apex Industrial Park, essentially making this county unincorporated area now part of the city of North Las Vegas. So when they talk about Apex Industrial Park being in North Las Vegas, that's true. But it was unincorporated Clark County first, just like the Gibson Business Park was unincorporated Clark County first in Henderson, which was then annexed by Henderson, just as Apex was annexed by the city of North Las Vegas. And again, Apex is served by rail, the Union Pacific Railroad, that also serves Las Vegas. Okay, this is a map showing North Las Vegas, and you see the Las Vegas Motor Speedway going up I-15. Okay, I don't know if you all have been out to sporting events there, but that's still in unincorporated Clark County. But you see the area of North Las Vegas that kind of goes right along I-15 there. And the purple area was the land that North Las Vegas then zoned for industry. The purple that you see on the bottom there, that's the Apex Industrial Park, but on the other side of the ridge. Now, remember I talked to you about concrete tilt-ups. North Las Vegas is getting to be the king of concrete tilt-up warehouses. These are very attractive buildings, and they can be really constructed cheaply. And one might wonder, why do we need all these warehouses? Well, my answer to that is one word: COVID. What happened with COVID was that people didn't want to go shopping anymore. They wanted to buy everything online. And for those of you who are certainly familiar with Amazon, many of you bought lots of stuff through Prime. That takes warehouses to store and get the stuff together before they can ship it out to you. In fact, Amazon did build a warehouse in North Las Vegas. So you see all these warehouses built. These are concrete tilt-ups. Okay, this is Apex proper now. Okay, remember I said US 93 and I-15. Okay, they built a Love's truck stop right there. We have West Mining, which already existed. And First Solar, that is an amazing large solar field. Now that is not actually in the Apex Industrial Park. That is just immediately to the north. But this is part of the Apex Industrial area being developed. Okay, so this is another side of it. We see power plants being built that area along the edge. And the reason they're there is because of the Kern River pipeline that comes down from Wyoming through Utah to Las Vegas on to Bakersfield. That natural gas pipeline provide fuel for the 3 power plants that are out at Apex right now. So if you didn't have a gas pipeline, you wouldn't have power plants. Again, infrastructure is critical in economic development. Okay, this gives you an idea of that solar field I was telling you about. It looks like water. It isn't, but it looks like it. Okay, now this part I think is really cool. Tesla built a Hyperloop testing facility out at Apex. Now, I like to tell people the future was being developed out at Apex. And what that is, I don't know if you remember from all these old World War II movies where the captain would into a microphone and send the message in a ship. Well, it's the idea of moving people by vacuum in a tube. And this was like, moving them like 500 miles an hour. So this would be a mass transit system underground that would be really, really fast, connecting cities. I mean, you wouldn't have the rail and other stuff like high-speed trains. This would be underground tubes. That gives you an example of the testing tube that was done by Tesla out there. And this is one of the power plants, the Apex power plant. There's another plant beyond it, which is the Skyhawk power plant. And I remember when they were doing a dedication for out there, and the then county manager, Dale Askew, was introducing me to somebody, and the guy's response was, "Oh, you're that Doug Bell." And I thought, okay, what does that mean? Anyway, so there's 2 power plants right there, the Apex operating plant, and then there's the Skyhawk. And beyond it is another solar field there. Okay, this is again I-15. We see the truck stop right there. And we see the pictures of new warehouses being proposed being built out at Apex. Now this is really cool. We got Smith's Distribution Center and Croc's. These are concrete warehouses. The Croc warehouse is 1 million square feet. That's one big frickin' concrete building. The Smith's Distribution Center right next to it is 885,000 square feet. It's really hard to find land that big that you can build these kind of warehouses like that. Now, what happened was, again, I told you about, when you're looking out to the north and you see I-15, you'll see a row of white along I-15. Those are all concrete tilt-up warehouses that have been built. So you can see them from up here in the valley. But what happened is then they started building a whole bunch of concrete tilt-up warehouses at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. In addition to all the cars and all that stuff that's being done out there. There's a whole bunch of warehouses out there. And we were running out of land in the Las Vegas Valley to build these warehouses. They're building some down here along near the M. You'll see all those concrete warehouses as well. But Apex is where it's at. And 1,850,000, these are really, really big warehouses. Okay, this is the part that I get really excited about, because you can see I get excited about infrastructure. This is a substation being built at Apex, again, to make power drop down to serve the plant in the plants being built in the area. Again, we have Kern River Pipeline, natural gas going through there. We have power lines coming in from, Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam coming down. And this shows utility lines that they're proposing to build. But up in the northern tier, where the brown area is up there, this is really cool. This is where there's going to be a 5 million gallon water tank. This is the big tank that's been needed. And to fill that tank, you obviously have to have water lines from the Las Vegas Valley going up there to fill it. And that provides back pressure as well as fire protection for the plants that are going to be built out at Apex. So that's $5 million right there, 5 million a tank. Okay, this is some of the power plants that are out at Apex right now. Okay, this is another cool thing out there. Las Vegas is served by 2 gas pipelines coming from California. It's the CalNev pipelines. There's a 14-inch and a 12-inch line that brings our fuels to Las Vegas Valley. That's from California. And realizing the seismic dangers of California, you know, you kind of wondered, is that where you really want to rely on for anything? So another Blue Ribbon panel decided they needed another oil source to come to Las Vegas. And so the UNEV pipeline was developed, and at Apex is this terminal. It's fuels that are being developed in Salt Lake City, and they go a 400-mile pipeline to Apex, 400 miles. So this is our third, really, pipe coming in for fuels to Las Vegas. And this shows the tank farm that has been developed out at Apex for those various fuels. You see it there. And again, we see different sized tanks and different kinds of gas and oil that are being stored at that site. So if California had a disruption through an earthquake or something like that, we would at least have another source for fuel coming in. And the refineries in Salt Lake City, I have to say, are mining the oil coming from Canada, which is that dark soils. The dark oil coming from Canada. That shows the pipeline from Salt Lake City, and its terminus is in Apex. And now, as part of some of the work that was done, they did some additional widening of US 93 to better serve the Apex area and development of an industrial park area. And again, this is just one of the many construction sites out at Apex. They're all over their place. Okay, Mike, can I ask you to put on that Apex thing? While he's getting that ready, there were 2 basic improvements for bringing water to Apex. There was one pipeline that was developed as they do the concrete tilt-ups along I-15, they bring in the pipeline with them, obviously. And so they did, with Western Contracting, get pipelines to the southern part of Apex. But then the big improvement was in 2023, the Southern Nevada Water Authority approved $250 million to bring the water that's been waited for, improvements to Apex, which included a 15-mile transmission line, a 20 million gallon per day pumping station, a power substation, and a 5 million gallon reservoir. These things are really critical, and that's going to make Apex really happen. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike as soon as he gets this presentation, which again will show you the energy of what's going on right now. Once the commercial is done. It's all the way, it's all the way to the mountain. Here. Yep, that's it. Okay, we'll continue. Just real quickly, many of you...
Las Vegas. Fox 5 News starts now.
A huge industrial park in North Las Vegas is helping create new jobs in Southern Nevada.
Companies like the Crocs footwear brand and Smith's grocery store have opened up distribution centers in Apex Industrial Park, and Fox 5's Alexis Fernandez has the details on how this is affecting the valley's economy. Alexis.
Well, Joe and Kim, Apex is a vast manufacturing hub that could bring between 45 and 70,000 new jobs over the next 10 to 20 years, according to the city of North Las Vegas. Apex Industrial Park, located off Interstate 15 and Highway 93 in North Las Vegas, is booming with development these days.
It seems like every week we get a new update that there's a new company that's interested, that there's a new developer that's building a building for build-to-suit, or a Fortune 500 company that wants to come be in our backyard.
The 18,000-acre park has 7,000 acres of developable land. It was set aside by the city of North Las Vegas to generate revenue.
It's a choke point for a lot of freight coming in from Long Beach and other ports in the California area, and then disbursement to the western United States and then beyond. I-15 is a main artery throughout the U.S.
Over the past few years, companies like Smith's grocery store and Crocs have moved into Apex. Crocs is now shipping from a 1 million square foot distribution facility, one of its 3 largest centers around the world. It's also the only 1 million plus square foot single footprint structure in Southern Nevada.
The workforce in Las Vegas was fantastic. We just got a really great group of people in. We could hire great managers and supervisors, and it really reinforced for us that as we expanded the business, that we wanted to continue to grow in Las Vegas.
Nearly 400 people are working at the facility.
We anticipate that sometime in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll probably be as high as 1,200 employees in the site.
And more jobs are expected.
Over the next 10 to 20 years, it would be about a $7 billion private investment, creating about 45,000 to 70,000 jobs, depending on the types of companies that come in.
But developing the area hasn't been easy. The city of North Las Vegas has had to invest more than $300 million as part of a public-private partnership to bring water and sewer infrastructure to the area. There is also congressional legislation that, if passed, would make the permitting process easier for businesses.
That's going to help be a tremendous lift in Apex. We still have some BLM corridors for utilities that are in place. Once that lands bill moves through DC, it's going to help us on timing issues when we have to cross those corridors.
And says development is just getting started.
Apex, just based on its sheer magnitude, will eventually become 4 or 5 separate industrial parks, and they'll all have their own kind of ecosystem and identity.
An official grand opening for Crocs and Smiths is expected to happen soon, and a new 15-mile water pipeline to Apex is scheduled to be completed by 2028. As for the congressional legislation tied to Apex, it is awaiting a vote by the full Senate.
Just one more comment, and then I'll be able to take questions. Economic development is like a relay race. People who start it aren't necessarily the ones who are going to be the finishing it. Now, I was involved, as I said, in helping to start it, but North Las Vegas, as you can see, is finishing it. And I'm just excited as punch to see what's going on, that essentially in 1990s, it was a dream. Today, it's becoming a reality. So with that, I'm open to questions. We have a microphone so you can be heard.
Aren't we glad that this has happened, that somebody stepped forward and got organized and had the vision, and then it got developed and developed.
It's important to remember, it began with a bang.
Okay, it developed with a bang. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah, is anything happening on the Hyperloop, or is that totally closed down now? I understand that some of the work is being done in Switzerland now on a Hyperloop, but I haven't heard anything about this one.
This was a test thing, so it was basically that's all it was going to be, as a test thing. Now, one other thing that I didn't mention because of time was, remember Faraday was going to build an electrical car plant out there? They were going to spend $1.3 billion out there, and of course, that never happened. And part of the reason, I think, personally, from on the outside looking in, was they really hadn't finished their prototype vehicle. And how do you build a plant when you really haven't tested out your vehicle very well? So that project failed. But all these other things. Another thing that's just recently been built in Apex is called Air Liquide, and they're developing, the plant is done, and they're producing liquid hydrogen for fuel cells. So, that develops electricity, but it's done through fuel cell batteries as opposed to other lithium batteries.
Are there other questions? Raise your hand. There's one over here, Tony.
Where's the water coming from that's going to be given in 2028?
The water's coming from the Las Vegas Valley.
Then how will that
I wouldn't
work?
say you're losing, you're utilizing water. Because water has to be used. And you can, if you put it in the homes, it goes into the sewage treatment plant, goes through the recycling center, the sewage treatment plants, goes into Lake Mead, and is returned. So this stuff predominantly will be used and returned through the sewage system. It's going to be connected to a sewage system as well. So they're not going to have pretty office parks out here with lots of grass and everything else. It's going to be used either in production or in sanitation out there, and then it's returned through the that isn't used that way. It's going to be used, returned to Las Vegas sewage treatment plants, then to Las Vegas Wash, to Lake Mead.
So most of the businesses are not pollution-type businesses.
Well, I would say most of it's going to be logistics stuff, where you're bringing in product, you're organizing it, then you're sending it out through all these online purchases. Smith's is probably bringing in their various stuff for their stores and will distribute it from that big warehouse to the Las Vegas Valley. So it's going to be a mixture of stuff. I mean, you have the UNEV oil pipelines. That's basically to give us another straw for our energy needs. So there'll be a bunch of stuff, but a lot of it right now is logistics. And, I kind of had a vision for this way back because when I'd go up to Utah and I get beyond St. George, there's this community called Washington. And if you look off to the right, there was a humongous warehousing area by Walmart. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's in Washington, in Utah, right off of I-15. So you take that concept and you bring it to Apex, and you have the land there to really build some big buildings. So from there, they'll use the rail at Apex, they'll use the highways at Apex to distribute it to the cities of the West.
So I have a question. So the Pepcon plant was out that way, correct?
No, the Pepcon plant was located at Lake Mead and Gibson.
Okay. So how far from Apex is that? That's not terribly far, is it?
Where we live here?
Yeah.
Well, we're up on a hill, but it was right down there at, we didn't exist then, because that was
Right.
1988.
But Lake Mead and Gibson
Right.
is not terribly far from the Apex.
Oh, yes, it is. Apex is over the hill beyond North Las Vegas, on the northern end of the valley, up over the hill, going on I-15 towards Utah.
So I guess my question was, I thought that when North Las Vegas annexed Apex, they did, right?
Yes.
So Apex is located southeast of North Las Vegas?
Northeast of the valley.
Got it. Okay, that's where my confusion is.
They're over the valley, go on I-15 going towards Utah. They're up over the ridge.
A similar question about Pepcon. I got here in 2008, and I had always heard rumors about a plant that had exploded in Henderson in that industrial area. I had heard it was a titanium plant, or it was the magnesium plant. Was there any other explosion, or was this the explosion and it really was?
It was the ammonia perchlorate plant of Pepcon. Now, there has been chlorine leaks in other plants in the unincorporated county island over time, because these plants get old and things start falling apart, and chlorine is a dangerous thing. And for people who are more in the valley, you see the rail line going right through Henderson to serve this industrial area. So there are, you saw all those tankers loaded with petrochemicals. They go through Las Vegas and Henderson to go out to those plants out there. So
The was the
it was the
ammonia.
Pepcon plant, absolutely.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And as you saw from that one chart, most of the land around it was empty. So today it'd be a whole different story if that plant was still there, because one of the things that Gibson Business Park did that I wasn't all that crazy about is developers always want to sell their land. They only make money as they sell their land. And to bring in industrial facilities takes a long time to bring in an ocean spray and other things. And so after the land was annexed to the city of Henderson, they built housing apartment complexes on the Gibson Business Park. So, you know, that always made me a little nervous. But again, you have all those big flyovers of highways that are right down there as it goes to US 95, goes down to Las Vegas and goes west to the 215 and all that. So hopefully we won't see explosions, but they built housing in the Gibson Business Park, which is where Pepcon had occurred.
Thank you, Doug, so much for coming and sharing all this really good information. Thank you.